Nevsky Prospect is right there, and this is State Russian Museum, Государственный Русский Музей. It's a very pretty building, one of many in St. Petersburg. And we're gonna head down that way where the entrance to the Russian Museum is located. There are many entrances to this museum for various exhibitions, so it shows you, these signs show you that for this particular exhibition you need to go elsewhere, but we're going to go through this entrance and see what's in there. There is a security post, sorry. So there are various exhibitions here. Depending on which exhibitions you want to see, you have to pay more or less. So regular exhibition is 1200 rubles, which is about 12 euros, and students half the price. And it tells you as much here in English. But it's only if you are not a citizen of Russia or certain neighboring countries, because if you are a Russian citizen, then you only have to pay 700 rubles as an adult and 500 as a student. There are also various discounts for various groups, like if you are a senior citizen, children 7 to 14, etc. But yes, if you are a Russian citizen or if you belong to any of these groups from which you can get a discount, make sure you present an ID which confirms that you are a member of one of these groups, and you would be given a fairly substantial discount. This is a very, very busy cloakroom. Oh man, this is October, late October, Monday, and yes, very crowded. What's happening here in the summer, one can only imagine. But yes, cloakrooms everywhere. What a big, busy place this is. There's a souvenir shop. Yeah, this is where it just came from. Through this tourniquet, you scan your ticket, you get through, and yeah, welcome to the Russian Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. Up this staircase you go to the beginning of the exhibition. It says Russian Museum of Emperor Alexander III, founded 13th of April 1895, open March 7th, 1898. So Old Russian art, 18th century art, early 19th century art, the beginning of the exposition of the Russian Museum. The icon of John the Baptist, written in the late 14th century. It's over 600 years old. Pretty amazing. From Constantinople, currently Istanbul. And this is Saint Nicholas. First half of 14th century. And this is Jesus, first half of 14th century. This is Mother of God, second half to end of 15th century. This is the Holy Trinity. This icon was written in the middle of 16th century, so mid 1500s. This is pretty amazing. These icons are like 500 to 600 years old, and you can imagine how many generations of Russian Orthodox Christians prayed to these icons. And I think quite a few of them are here because when the Bolsheviks were destroying the churches after the 1917 revolution, at least they had enough sense in them to not destroy all of the icons. Obviously they destroyed a whole lot, but some of the icons we see here, if not most, were saved during the destruction of the churches and ended up in a museum. We are in St. Petersburg, the city which was founded by Peter the Great. Here he is. Russian emperor, the first Russian emperor, Peter the Great. Before Peter the Great there were Tsars, but he was the first to be called an emperor. And he founded this city. Called St. Petersburg. And this fine young lady is named Sarah Eleonora. Not quite sure who she is, but a very lovely young lady. This is Mr. Menshikov. He was, I think, a very high-ranking official in the Russian government in 1840s. At least I recognize the name Mr. Menshikov. This looks like one of our empresses. And sure enough, that's Empress Elizabeth. So we just finished checking out all the portraits. There were like 5 or 6 halls, and the next hall has various very ornamented pieces of furniture. This obviously was a palace. Not quite sure who it belonged to, but yeah, that's pretty much probably was the interior decoration of this palace, and they left it as is for us to take a look at and admire all the beauty. And the next hall after that is again full of portraits, as well as there are a few statues here. And each hall has an attendant who would definitely let you know if you would do something which you're not supposed to, but basically do not touch any art, do not use flash if you're going to take pictures, and keep it quiet. Pretty simple rules, pretty common sense rules. We have a guided tour next to an enormous painting. So this particular picture depicts a biblical story when snakes were a bunch of snakes descended upon the Jewish people and were causing many of them to die because they were biting the people, and God told Moses to make a statue of a serpent, a snake, and whoever would look at that statue would become healed. So that's what this particularly large picture is depicting. Oh, бросил. We were asked not to come too close to a painting, so you can't even come too close to it because you can accidentally touch it, and they definitely don't want that. Just be aware that this museum, because it's full of fairly ancient art, there are some statues and paintings depicting female and even male nudity. So if it's something which you might be uncomfortable with, or your children might be uncomfortable with, perhaps skip visiting this museum, because I wouldn't say it's commonplace, but it's definitely something which is present here. Just be aware of that. Speaking of, there is a statue, actually two of them, with ladies not particularly dressed very well. Yeah, and back in the day it was perfectly normal to depict human body in this particular way. Right now it would be somewhat scandalous, but yeah, back in the day people had a slightly different approach to depicting a human body, and that's something to keep in mind when you visit an exposition such as what we have here in the Russian Museum. And we're back at the main staircase, so that's it for this particular exhibition. If you take it slow, it's probably going to take 1.5 to 2 hours. And definitely very, very impressive old icons and portraits and sculptures. Yeah, like I said, be aware of the fact that there is quite a bit of nudity, both male and female, in paintings and sculptures. And definitely don't touch anything. Those attendants are very, very quick to approach you and tell you to watch what you're doing. No, looks like we're not done yet. We just descended from the staircase, and there is another exhibition on this floor, so let's go check it out. Yeah, this is a more modern art. This is from 1890s. Looks like, yeah, the fall of 1890s. That's what the fall of 1892 and 1894 looked like. And looks like we have some landscapes here, which is always good to see. Look at this girl. Look at this very, very awesome girl. 1883. This is possibly your great-great-great-grandma holding an umbrella. And this is one of the most famous Russian paintings by Vasily Surikov, Suvorov crossing of the Alps, when the Russian army I think surprised the Austrians by crossing where the enemy did not realize Russians could cross because of the very harsh winter conditions, and yet the Russian army did it. And there's Suvorov on a horse, and the Russians achieved a very, very prominent victory because of this unexpected maneuver. And isn't this nice? This looks like a photograph, really. Like seriously, this looks like a photograph. This is a painting. I mean, what amazing skill by an artist. The artist's name, Konstantin Krzyzewski. born in 1858, died in 1911. Wow, that's quite a masterpiece, eh? This isn't bad either. Spring in the Crimea, same artist, very nice. Straight ahead, looks like we have Tsar. Nicholas is a second. It's definitely him. It was done in 1896. And the Tsar, as we all know, was killed by the Bolsheviks in 1917. There he is as a young man. And in this hall we see portraits of the Russian officials around that time in the late 19th century. Here we have a more modern art, if you will. This is from 1916. So, yeah, 109 years old. By standards of art, this is like yesterday, 1916, right? Three joys. Three joys. This is 1910, and this painting is called Sunny Spring Day in Sergiev Posad, and Sergiev Posad is where the famous Lavra is located. St. Sergius Holy Trinity Lavra in Sergiev Posad, where we visited early this month. It's an amazing place, absolutely go there if you have a chance. It's about an hour and a half by train from Moscow, maybe even a bit less. And then it's like a 15-minute walk from the train station. Created in 18th and 19th century. So 200 years ago or so. Artisans were skilled enough to make this fantastic beauty in Rostov region of Russia. These are traditional Russian female festive dresses. This particular one is from the second half of 19th century, so around 170 years old or so. This is actually a wedding dress from 1870s from the Voronezh region of Russia. That's what a bride would wear. Very nice. That's a pretty cool tea kettle, or teapot, whatever that is. But yeah, this is the late 18th century. So like 1770, maybe 1780. Man, back in the day, people drank tea from this beauty. Look at that. Maybe life wasn't so bad back in the day. Obviously, not everyone had this. It's probably some sort of wealthy family which had this, but yeah, this is pretty impressive. Considering very utilitarian kettles we use today for drinking tea, something like that back in the day would have been quite awesome, actually. Even now it would be awesome, but back in the day it probably was like, man. Definitely not someone from the Russian past, but Mr. Stallone was here when an exhibition was opened in 2013. Small world. Mr. Stallone at this very place in 2013, and this particular part of the Russian Museum is dedicated to the history of the Russian Museum. Remember the staircase at the beginning of the exposition? Well, here it is. Tsar Alexander III still there. And this was in 1900. Speaking of history, yeah, that staircase sure has seen its fair share of visitors. And that's Tsar Alexander III and his family right there. And these are the attendants of the museum in 1898. This very place, those guys were keeping an eye on it. And yeah, that's just the way it goes. This is Alexander III, Tsar Alexander III. And we are back to a hall where we have already been. So yeah, in addition with the upper exhibition hallways, the lower exhibition hallway adds another an hour to an hour and a half. So there's a revised estimate. If you take it slow, it probably is going to take you 2.5 to 3 hours to look at all the exhibits here. And obviously, if you go a bit faster, it will take less time, and you can actually have a guided audio tour, self-guided audio tour. I haven't quite figured out how to do it. Shouldn't be too hard. And you can also pay for a personal guided tour, like we saw a tour guide. It's actually an extra cost to have that. But yes, it's a very impressive museum. Definitely a whole lot of Russian history here, and some very, very impressive art. is the end of our excursion, visiting of the Russian Museum. So there is one big exhibition on the second floor and also one big exhibition. You pretty much walk all the way around. You come out here on the first floor. Very interesting place for sure, lots of history. You don't mind the nudity which is present. I wouldn't say in overabundance, but it is present here. It's a good place to visit for sure. Okay, so this tells us about the history of this museum. It was called Mikhailovsky Palace. It was built in 1825, took 6 years to build it, and it was built for Grand Duke Mikhail Pavlovich. He was the fourth son of Emperor Pavel I, and so it was his residence until his wife died, and then Nicholas II purchased this palace and turned it into a museum. So that's how this became a museum. It was a palace for a Grand Duke. So he died and his wife died, and then the state, Nicholas II, who was the Tsar at the time, he purchased it and turned it into a museum. So here's the entrance, and this is where you get your audio guide. You come here to this lady, and yeah, it's 500 rubles. 500 rubles in Russian. You can have an audio guide, and it will tell you what's where when you're walking along, and 500 rubles as well in a whole bunch of other languages, including English, German, French, Italian, Spanish, Chinese, and looks like Korean. Now we know. Now we know. A bit of a hilarious tidbit. You see those lady guards there? They actually have a truncheon. A truncheon for those of you who misbehave. So when you come to the Russian Museum, unless you want to taste the truncheon from one of these fine lady guards, do behave. Do behave. Hello, St. Petersburg. Alright, yeah, so we basically entered there and exited here. Russian Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. Late October 2025.